So I'm an everything seller, meaning I'll sell basically anything that'll make me money. Some people choose to pick a particular niche like clothing and focus exclusively on that. Which approach is better? Well, let's talk about that. Hello and welcome back to my weekly show where I talk about the ups and downs and in-betweens of selling on eBay. We've got a lot to cover this week. Because it's the beginning of May, I'm going to be talking about my sales performance for April. And of course, I'll talk about my sales for this past week in particular. I'll walk through some garage sale finds I found over this past weekend. And we'll also dig into this topic of niche selling versus selling across all categories. So let's dig into that first. Let's start with selling in a particular niche first to sort of break down the pros and cons. The pros for selling in a particular niche are, number one, it simplifies your operations. And so everything from sourcing to listing to your inventorying and shipping, all of that can be optimized for one product type. And that just saves a bunch of time and reduces friction in basically every part of the process. Everything from your storage layout to your photo setup can be streamlined when you're selling the same kind of thing. That's a really big positive. If you're selling nothing but clothing, you can just like build out this mini factory of everything that you need to do to support that business. And that's a big positive of selling in one niche, is just sort of the ability to simplify your operations. I also think there's fewer sourcing methods are needed. You can just sort of focus your energy on one or two reliable inventory streams instead of juggling 5 or 10 like you may have to do if you're selling across all categories. This is not, I mean, it really depends on what you're selling, but for the most part, it's easier to sort of narrow in on a smaller set of inventorying methods when you have less types of inventory to deal with. This can also be seen as a con as well. I'll talk about that in a second, but I still think it's a positive thing for people that sell in particular categories to be able to kind of narrow in on their inventorying methods to find what works for them. Number 3, this is a big one. You get to really build a deeper level of expertise when you're selling in a particular category. You get better at pricing, you get better at like spotting fakes or identifying value quickly and just sort of knowing what sells. And that's really the name of the game in reselling, is that depth of knowledge. And if you're selling across all categories, it's difficult to get that depth of knowledge across an infinite number of different categories. But if you're selling in a particular niche, like, I don't know, men's jeans or whatever, you may do that for 6 months and have a pretty mastery level knowledge of what has value in that category. And so it's really much easier to build that deeper level of expertise. Number 4 is really around repeat buyers and brand loyalty. And so having a focused store that focuses on one particular niche is just easier to follow as a buyer. It's easier to trust and probably more likely to generate repeat business. I sell across all categories. I rarely get repeat business. It just doesn't happen very often at all, because why would it? Why would a buyer decide to come back to buy something from my store when they bought something randomly? But if you're selling in a particular niche, like, I don't know, comic books or Pokemon cards or whatever, it's much easier to build repeat buyers if you are selling in that particular niche. And finally, if you're selling in a particular niche, it has a better opportunity to have like better data insights. It's just easier to see what's working and adjust your pricing or your strategy when things aren't working. And if you're selling across all categories, that just sort of muddies the water a little bit, and it makes it difficult to spot trends and things like that. But if you sell in a particular niche, what comes with that is having sort of cleaner data insights. And that can be really important when you're trying to scale your business. All right, let's talk about the cons of selling in a particular niche. There's a couple of them. The first one, I think, is it can be harder to source inventory. If your category dries up locally or seasonally or whatever, you're just sort of stuck and you have to pivot and figure out what to do. Whereas if you're selling across all categories, you can find inventory almost anywhere. But if you're selling in one particular category, it may be harder to source inventory in that particular category. You just have less options than you would otherwise. All right, the second one here, this is a big one for me. I think, selling in a particular niche, it can also just get boring over time, right? You're just selling the same items, you're creating the same listings, you're sort of dealing with the same problems from customers. It could just start to feel like a job or like factory work even. That's unless you just really love the niche. And that's important. People that ask me, hey, should I sell in a particular niche or should I sell across all categories? I advise them, like, look, if you're going to pick a niche, like, make sure you like that niche, because if you don't, it's just going to get boring. You're going to get burned out. And so if you really love the niche, though, if you're just like really into like aquariums or whatever, it might be good to pick that niche because you just won't get bored of it. But make sure you really like what you're doing. The third one here, I'm going to call like niche vulnerability. So if demand drops or if eBay changes, fees in the particular category or changes their rules or whatever, or if your niche is seasonal, like, your entire business can be affected by that if you're like focused on one particular particular category. Whereas if you're spread across many categories, you're just less susceptible to sort of niche vulnerability. And that can be important. Your business is more vulnerable to changes, which is never a good thing. So that's also something to consider. And the last con here of selling in a particular niche is what I'll say, like competitive pressure, I guess. A smaller niche may attract like more specialized sellers who can maybe outcompete you on speed or pricing or sourcing. And that's just, again, you're more susceptible to that sort of competitive pressure if you're selling in a particular niche than you would be if you were spread out across many different ones. And so that's the pros and cons of selling in a particular niche. Let's talk about selling across all categories now. So the pros here, number one, is just, I think it's easier to find inventory. You're not limited by niche constraints. You can basically flip whatever you find that's profitable, and you can often find that basically anywhere you go, whether that's estate sales or garage sales or auctions or closeouts or thrift stores, wholesales. It's basically all on the table. When I'm going to Target to buy stuff, to buy deodorant, I'm like often just checking comps and stuff. And so it's just easier to find inventory, I think, when you're spread across many different categories, because you can just find deals pretty much anywhere. You can find things to flip almost anywhere. Whereas if you're selling like men's jeans, you're limited. You're just not going to find deals on men's jeans everywhere you go. Number two, this is a big reason why I sell across all categories personally. It's also very subjective, but it's more interesting. Each day feels different. I'm constantly learning about new categories and products and trends. That just keeps it fun and interesting for me. I would just get burned out if I was doing the same thing over and over again. And so it's really important to me that this stays interesting and fun. I just don't, otherwise it wouldn't last unless it was interesting or fun to me. Number three, the risk is spread out. I mentioned this earlier, but if one category tanks, others might still be booming, and it just doesn't really impact your business. Like, VCRs, for example. I sell maybe a dozen VCRs per year. Let's say that category goes away for whatever reason. It's just not going to have a huge impact on my business. It'll be replaced with something else. Whereas if VCRs were my only business, that would be much more problematic. So your risk is spread out when you're selling across all categories. Another one is like what I'll call trend following. And so if you sell everything, you can sort of quickly pivot into specific categories that are trending. Again, if you're selling nothing but men's jeans, you just sort of have like your blinders on, and that's what you're looking for. And the idea that you might pick up something new that's trending, it would just be disruptive to your business. Whereas when you're selling everything, your business is optimized for sort of spontaneous sourcing finds. And so that just helps you follow trends more and expand your business in that way. And the last pro I'll talk about here is like what I'll call like a higher upside on random finds. That's one of the great things about reselling, is that every once in a while you come across these sort of hidden gems. You just had no idea that they were going to be worth what they're worth. And that happens when you're selling in a particular category. Like if you're selling men's jeans, you are going to come across like a pair of Jankos that are worth $500. Like that's still happens, but when you're spread across many different categories, the opportunity for finding those hidden gems is just more frequent. There's just more opportunity for those high return random finds that are really fun. There are cons to selling across all categories too, of course. The number one, this is a big one, it's just more complex operations, right? You just need multiple box sizes, different packing materials, different listing strategies, different storage solutions. You can't optimize for everything. And so each item you source may just need a whole custom like setup or workflow or whatever. That's just really hard to scale. You don't have that when you're selling in a particular niche. You can easily scale. You can buy one box size or poly mailers and just like center your operations around that, but it's very difficult to do that around being an everything seller. And so your operations are going to be more complex. The second one here is really around what I'm calling mental overload. When you sell everything, you're basically in constant research mode. Every time I go outsourcing, I'm always checking comps, and that will be forever because I can't learn everything, and I'm always learning new things. That's part of the appeal, but also there can be an overload, a mental overload that comes with that sort of constant research mode, constant comp checking. It can drain your focus, like pricing and prep can take longer. So there's definitely an aspect of mental overload that comes with selling across all categories. And then the third one here, there's definitely a slower learning curve. The whole idea here is to improve your knowledge of what has value. If you're narrowed in on a particular niche, that's easier to do. You can learn one category relatively quickly, but if you're selling across all categories, you may never master any one of them or get even close to mastering any one of them, because that just takes a lot of time, and you would have to do it across hundreds or thousands of categories of items, and it's just probably not going to happen. And so there is a slower learning curve when you're spread across many different categories. But how do you decide which one is right for you. I think like you don't want to start with the question like which is better, because truthfully like neither is better. You can be successful doing either approach. Instead, I think it's better to ask like what am I optimizing for? If your goal is to simply build a big business and make as much money as possible, picking a lucrative niche is probably going to be the best bet, because again, you're trying to build like a tight little factory. You want to make quick decisions. You want the lowest amount of friction as possible. You want high repeatability, and that's what selling in a particular niche gives you. Every process you build gets smoother with repetition. Sourcing becomes like muscle memory. You don't waste time researching or second guessing. Your just whole system is aimed at shaving like seconds off of each task, not minutes or hours, for example. And so in the end, when you're selling in a particular niche, I think you end up just being able to source more inventory more quickly, list it faster, and so on. And that just makes it easier to scale. But if you pick the wrong niche, one that's not lucrative or one that you don't like, and you're someone who's prone to burnout, you may just never make it far enough before you actually burn out and or pivot into another niche. And so you want to be really careful about which niche you pick. But if you pick the right one, I think it definitely can be the most lucrative. But if you're optimizing for something else like adaptability or longevity, being a generalist seller could be better. I think of it as building a radar, instead of a factory. You want to stay open to the weird flips, liquidations, one-offs, category shifts. I think generalist sellers tend to thrive on novelty and unpredictability. They don't really get caught off guard when their main category slows down because they never had one. They're sort of like flexible by design. And I choose to sell across all categories because it more closely aligns with my own interests. The highest priority for my own part-time reselling business isn't making the most money that I can. Now, I obviously want to make as much money as I can, but I'm optimized for something different. I'm optimized more for like life balance and long-term resilience. And if I was selling nothing but clothing, for example, I would just have gotten bored a long time ago and probably quit. But selling across all categories sort of keeps things interesting enough for me, and I basically never get bored of it. And I've been doing this for a super long time. So even if I do make less money in the short term, I think this model keeps me going longer. So I think it's the wrong question to ask, like which strategy makes the most money. I think it's better to ask which strategy lets me do this consistently for the next 3, 5, 10 years or whatever without quitting. Because again, niching down is probably the way to go if your priority is to make as much money as possible. But if your sourcing environment or your personality makes focusing on a single niche feel like a chore, it's not going to matter how profitable it is because you'll burn out eventually. And I think that's what kills most sellers, right? Most sellers just quit. It's not necessarily their strategy. They just burn out and quit and don't do it anymore. And that's the big like business killer for resellers. But how about you? Do you sell across all categories? Do you sell in a particular niche? Why did you choose that? How did you get to that decision? Let me know in the comments below. I'd love to hear. Okay, where are we at now? Let's take a look at some garage sale stuff I found over this past weekend. All right, not a great day for garage sales, honestly. Only picked up a few things. There just wasn't many garage sales out, unfortunately, but we did hit up a few. It was kind of rainy. I think that's why. Either way, we did find some decent stuff. Actually, this Lisa Frank playing card set, not in the best condition. Looks like there's probably some water damage to the case here, but the deck is complete. You can see we paid 10 cents for it. I'm going to need to try to get that off, that sticker off without damaging the cardboard. This is a vintage piece, and I don't want to damage the cardboard because Lisa Frank vintage stuff just does super well. This, if this was in really good condition, it would be worth probably $100. My guess is we'll get, in this condition, maybe between 30 and 70, just depending. I have to do some more research, but as you can see, we paid 10 cents for it, so definitely worth the risk there. But anything Lisa Frank you want to pick up if it's vintage. Also got a Sony VHS DVD combo player here. I always pick these things up when I see them. I paid $3 for this one. Need to test it, make sure it works, but it should be $100 if it does work. And they're really not too bad to ship. This will cost probably between 10 and 15 bucks to ship, depending on where it's going. Also picked up this Marvel Raiders of the Lost Ark comic book here. Not great. I paid $1 for it. It's probably going to go for 15 to 25, I would guess. Did get an Apple TV. This one's nice, a nice one actually, and I only paid $3 for it as well. I might keep this for personal use, but if not, it'll probably go for between $70 and $90. The remote is not in the best condition. You can see it's sort of missing something on the top right, missing the button on the top right. So, and then this Panasonic Omni Movie. This is just an old video camera here. It was only $1 for one. It has everything you need there. I'll need to test it, but even in non-working condition, it goes for like 40 bucks. And surprisingly, it has a decent sell-through rate. I was worried that it was, just not going to sell at all, but there is a decent sell-through rate on this. We'll see if it works. And my guess is that I might, if it works, I might get $50 to $100 for it, which is kind of surprising. I was surprised when I saw the comp. So anyway, that's it for today's garage sales. Kind of a small haul, but not too bad. I'll make some money. All right, taking a look at April. Last month, I had a gross sale amount of $7,261 and a net sales of $4,278. That is a really good month for me, much higher than I was expecting. In fact, I'm going to go back and look at April of last year, because I don't think it was nearly as good. Yeah, last year I had $4,652 in gross sales and $2,327. So that's, look at that, almost double. And I think a big reason of that is just inventory. Inventory dictates almost entirely what you're going to sell. And in April of last year, I just did not have as good of inventory as I have right now. That's the biggest differentiator, really. But almost all of my metrics in April of 2025 were up compared to April of last year. Look at that, $37 average gross sale and $18 average net sale last year. This year, $62.36. This year, 59% net profit margin, 50% net profit margin last year. I had 133 new listings and 118 sales this year. Last year, I had more listings and 125 and more sales, yet less money. So that's telling right there. Better inventory at a higher cost. And so that's entirely the reason. The makeup of my inventory is the entire reason why April this year has done so well for me. Let's take a look at this last 7 days though. Over the last 7 days, I had a gross sale amount of $1,667 and a net sales of $1,036. So over $1,000 in net sales over the last 7 days in a part-time capacity. Very, very happy with that. Last week, I think it was like $600. So almost doubled of last week as well. I had a $52 average gross per sale and a $30 average net per sale. My net profit margin was 62%. Looks like I spent $141 on new inventory and $146 was the cost of goods that sold over this last 7 days. $253 in marketplace fees and $232 in shipping label charges. I had 38 new listings, which is good. My goal for every week is 35, so it was 3 over, and 35 sales, so almost 1-to-1 there. I had an average time to list of 1 day, an average time to sell of 5 months, and almost a 700% return on investment. So overall, just a really good week this past week. Let's jump in and take a look at my sales. These aren't my top 10 by net sales. I typically do that, but lately I've just been cherry picking different sales just because they have an interesting backstory or it's something that I think you should probably look out for when you're outsourcing. So let's take a look at what I've got here. Coming in at number 10 is this Sony Dream Machine CD player alarm clock. I like buying Sony alarm clocks. They're never worth a ton of money, but they're usually a pretty quick sale. This one was definitely a quick sale, under 24 hours, 19 hours it took to sell for $31.98. That's $24.99 plus $6.99 in shipping. Again, my net return was not great, $11.58. I paid $5 at a garage sale, but I just knew it was going to sell quickly and it was going to be easy to photograph, easy to list, and easy to ship. So in my mind, I will take a lower net return for items that have a higher sell-through rate and they're easy to list and ship. And that's the case here. Only $11.58, but I'll take it. Coming in at number 9, this Cards Against Humanity. Y'all saw this last week on the video, and y'all called out in the comments that this is a company that typically veros their items on listings, meaning they reach out to eBay and have eBay take down listings under their verification rights ownership program, and so you end up, having the listing taken down. I have heard that, but I've never personally gotten a vero from Cards Against Humanity, so I continue to buy it and sell it. This took 2 days to sell. Again, I didn't think it was going to sell for much money. I knew it was going to sell quickly, and it was going to be easy to pack, easy to list, easy to ship, all of that. My net return was only $6.45. But again, when your operations are sort of optimized and it's easy to list stuff and easy to ship stuff, like why not? This added basically 5 minutes of extra work in terms of sourcing it and listing it and eventually shipping it. And again, I only made $6.45, but to me, it's just when it only adds 5 minutes of extra work throughout the entire life cycle of this product, I just don't mind. I don't mind making a little bit of money on it. And if I ever do get a vero from them, I'll stop buying them. Coming in at number 8, this Adidas and Farm Rio shirt. Where did this come from? This came from a long time ago at Salvation Army for $5. Looks like it sold for $27.24. That's $20.25 plus $6.99 in shipping. The net return, not a whole lot, $14.16. The reason I wanted to call this one out though is because it's a recent relist. If you see this, we had it listed on November 28th, 2023. I ended it this time last year and relisted it. It didn't sell for the entire year, and a year later, it got ended and relisted, and then it sold 7 days or 6 days later. And so a decent chunk of what I sell typically comes after an end and a relist, because I just find that your listings sort of get lost out in search, especially if they're in a crowded category like an Adidas shirt like this. Over time, that listing is just going to get lost. There's hundreds, thousands of other listings that are similar, and it seems like eBay search just tends to favor new listings. And so I definitely recommend ending and relisting on a regular basis. This one resulted in a sale for sure. Coming in at number 7 is this quick set. What is this? This is a doorknob. Why am I having trouble thinking about what this thing is? It's a key. I don't know why I called it a keyed entry handle set. Nobody calls this thing a handle set. The reason I wanted to call this out, I didn't make a ton of money, $22 and a penny. The reason I'm calling this out, this was actually a bad buy for me. Like, I bought this at a Salvation Army. I paid $8 and I bought a ton of these. There's probably 15 of these quick sets that are open box. And, you know, I'm shying away from items like this more and more because they're open box. I just can't guarantee that all the pieces are there. And it takes a lot of time and effort to go through this box and ensure that all the pieces are there. And in this case, I went through the box and it was missing one thing, which was the key. Pretty important thing to be missing. But I just, needed to cut my losses effectively. So I lowered the price quite a bit. I mean, it's still worth quite a bit, $40 plus $6.99 in shipping. But the reason I don't like selling this thing or this type of thing is just the amount of effort that it takes to list. This probably took 10 or 15 minutes to list. And if everything that I listed took 10 or 15 minutes to list, I would list and sell far less than I do. I try to keep my listing process between 3 and 5 minutes. And when I have to hunt through a box like this to make sure everything is there, that just greatly increases the time to list. And so I'm just not going to be buying stuff like this again in the future. I'm going to get rid of all the stuff that I have, and this stuff with intricate pieces that I need to make sure they're all there. It's just not worth it for me. So that's why I wanted to call this one out. Coming in at number 6, how about some vintage underwear for y'all? This is a good one. This buyer bought 3 of them. Again, this is another result of a recent end and relist. You can see here, I listed it on November 30th of last year. I ended it on April 30th, less than a week ago. And then it sold 2 days later. And I actually sold 3 of them to the same buyer as a part of this. Also notice I accidentally left the estate sale price tag on there. Didn't affect it anyway, but definitely don't want to do that. Remove your price tags. People don't want to know what you did pay for it. So anyway, this one in particular got a net return of $33.56. Again, there was 2 more with it. So another $33. So I made almost $100 in net by selling 3 of these at the same time to the same buyer after a very recent relist. So really good one to call out. If you're not ending and relisting regularly, you definitely should be doing it. Coming to number 5 are these Ray-Ban Aviator large metal gold sunglasses. I got these out of a bulk buy. They took 3 months to sell, but they did sell for $51.98. That's $44.99 plus $6.99 in shipping. The net return was $34.21. That's a 658% net profit margin. The reason I wanted to call this out, I have been selling quite a bit of sunglasses because I did get a bunch of sunglasses from several bulk buys over the winter. And one thing I'm noticing, because I have sold sunglasses in the past, but never with a ton of regularity like I am now, but it is a category I found that is more prone to returns. And so my return rate is a little bit higher because I do offer free returns, which means that I pay for the return shipping. And I've gotten a lot of just changed my mind returns. And I don't really mind that necessarily. I mean, I'd rather not get a return, but I do withhold the original cost to ship when I do that. Just a heads up, I think sunglasses are something that people like to try on. If somebody's buying an exact pair that they know how it's going to look on their face, it's not an issue. But either way, hopefully these don't get returned. Coming in at number 4, this is a fun one. Bad Rap Extreme Dinosaurs action figure. I was at a garage sale not this past weekend, but the weekend before, and found this guy amongst a bunch of other toys for $1 a piece. They were definitely from the 90s. They didn't have any I didn't know that they were this brand Extreme Dinosaurs. They didn't have that marking on it, but they did have on the foot 1996 on there. So I knew they were from the 90s, and it's just interesting. I live in an area where there are a lot of older folks, in their 70s and 80s, where they have kids that are my age, and so I just expect to find way more toys from the 90s like this than I actually do find. It's really interesting, but when I do see 90s toys, I almost always buy it like I did here. This one, I didn't comp it or do anything. I just said, somebody's probably going to want it. It's probably going to be worth more than $1. Most of them that I bought were worth $15 to $25, but this was the best one. It sold in 30 minutes. Look at that. I may have underpriced it. It went for $56.98. That's $49.99 plus $6.99 in shipping, and the net return was $42.25. Not bad for 30 minutes. Coming in at number 3 here, these Whispering Waters ground dripper. So this, y'all may have noticed this maybe 3 or 4 weeks ago. I think it was the first week of garage sales. I showed this on here, and this was something that just had no sales history at all. I think there was 1 or 2 listed, but no sold comps, but I still bought it anyway. And it's just a good example of needing to trust your gut. This thing is just an interesting piece. It's like you hook a hose to it, it connects onto a bird bath, as you can see there. It was made in the USA. It was pretty old. It was new in the box. And even though it did not have any sales history, I was like, you know what? Somebody's going to want this thing. So I bought it. What did I spend? Spent $2 at a garage sale. It took 18 days to sell for $59.99 plus $9.99 in shipping. So the total there was $69.98, and my net return was $46.70. And so you can't just use data. You have to trust your gut on some of these things. And over time, you just get a feel for what is going to sell or not. And I've just sold enough things, not this in particular, but enough things like it. These just sort of like weird solutions, I would call it. Like somebody wants to keep their bird bath filled with water. Maybe there's modern solutions, but this is just an interesting kind of almost vintage solution that I knew somebody was going to want, and they did. So don't always just go by the data. Trust your gut sometimes. Coming in at number 2, y'all saw this VCR on my garage sale video just a few minutes ago. This thing sold very quickly, 3 hours, and I knew it was going to sell very quickly. I paid $2.50. I think I said I paid $3, but it was actually $2.50 at this garage sale. It sold for $104.98. That's $89.99 plus $14.99 in shipping. VCRs do really well. They just don't make new VCRs anymore, I'm pretty sure. And so people who need a VCR have to go to the secondary market to find them. And the VCR DVD combos do even better. If they have the remote, it's even better. I just knew that this was going to sell very quickly. Sony is also a premium brand, and so Sony's equipment is generally going to last longer than other random brands. Same goes with like Panasonic. Just the brands that you recognize are usually going to be the good ones, and Sony's one of the better ones here. And I just knew it was going to be about $100. And most people just don't realize that these still have value. So you can often get them for very cheap at garage sales like this I got for $2.50. Sort of crazy, but yeah, sold in 3 hours for $83.41. Coming in at number 1, I think this was my best sell of the week. I can't remember exactly, but this is just a weird one. And I wanted to call it out because who's paying $140 for a toilet paper holder? I mean, I'm glad that people are paying that. I just can't imagine. This is like a discount too. I can't remember the actual MSRP of this toilet paper holder, but it was a lot. And I just, I don't know. I just can't imagine ever being like, yes, I need my toilet paper holder to be a very particular special one that's going to cost this much money. But hey, I'm happy to sell it. No judgment. People like what they like. I don't mean to judge. It's crazy. $140 they paid for this on a discount, for this Kohler toilet paper holder. My net return on this was $92.47. Let's see how this pallet is doing. If you've been watching over the past few weeks, you know that I bought a pallet of different fixtures and plumbing supplies. It's doing really well. So, right now we're at net income of $1,841. The gross is $4,200. My payout's $3,000. I paid $1,200 for it. I still have 97 products listed. I've sold 47, so I've sold a small fraction of the total amount listed, and there's still a lot to list, right? There's still a big pile of stuff that I keep going through here. So this is a very good pallet. I think I'll make around 10 grand net when this pallet is all said and done. So, all right, now that the lights are out, let's talk. I've been buying a lot of stuff on eBay lately, just personal stuff. We're trying to reduce the amount of money we spend on Amazon. It's just so easy to buy stuff on Amazon. We're trying to curb that a little bit. So we're trying to spread our money around just a little bit, including back out into eBay, help some other sellers. But I'll tell you what, buying on eBay, it just sort of sucks sometimes. There are a lot of sellers on eBay that give us good sellers, a bad name. I know that y'all aren't the bad sellers out there, but I just had an experience this past week where I bought a book and I sort of forgot about it. I forgot that I bought the book, and then I got a shipping notification. I was like, oh yeah, I forgot that I even ordered that thing. And it took them 11 days to ship this from when I ordered it. And so I was like, okay, well, I'd forgotten about it. I didn't hound them to ship it, so whatever. But it took them 11 days to actually process the order and ship it. And then it showed up as delivered, even though I didn't have it anywhere. So I reached out to the seller. I was like, hey, this thing shows is delivered. And he goes, yeah. He goes, actually, my VA, my virtual assistant, put the wrong tracking number on this order. So my apologies. Here's the correct tracking number. And it still had not been processed. So now we're like over 2 weeks into this whole ordeal, and my item had still yet to leave this person's house or the warehouse or wherever, I don't know. And it was using some weird tracking. I had never heard of it. It was called like Better Trucking. I don't even know. It was not UPS, FedEx, or the post office. It was some weird tracking number or company. And it was just, and I really want to get, like, I'm a seller. I get it. I'm like, I'm empathetic to what's going on here, but it's just unacceptable. It's unacceptable to wait 2 weeks to ship something and expect that your buyer is going to be like, okay, cool, thank you. And I'm not going to give this person a negative review, even though I feel like the need to warn other buyers that you may not have a great experience here. But I just, I'm a seller too. I don't know. So I just told the person, I was like, hey, I'm not really happy. It took 2 weeks to ship this thing. It eventually did show up. I got the book. And they just refunded me. I'm like, okay, fine. Do you want me to send it back? They're like, no, don't worry about it. Just like, what? It just gives all of us sellers a bad name. And that's part of why I get on here on this YouTube channel and do what I do, is just, to educate and to help folks become good sellers. And so don't, if you want to be a good seller, don't wait 2 weeks to ship it. Don't, hire a VA that you can't trust who's going to mess things up. They also had like 15 things listed. Why do you need a VA for 15 listings? So anyway, I'm rambling. That's enough for today. We'll see you next week.